What's going on? It's the RapNerd. I'm here today to talk about Lloyd Banks' new album that dropped on Halloween, which is what he's been doing for a minute, called Halloween Havoc 6, The Six of Swords. And being a lifelong Banks fan, I enjoyed the hell out of this album. I love it, added it to my library, and it will become part of the Lloyd Banks music I play moving forward. And as long as Banks continues to drop these, I will continue to listen to them and do my reviews. And again, another great album. And one of the things I love about this project is, particular, is I can hear a lot of vintage Banks in this album when it comes to the production. There's stuff that reminds me of the early G-Unit radio days. Like there's some sample in here that kind of sounds like What's Beef in the background. That kind of gives me the vibe of something that they would rap on back in the day with Fifth on the Hook with him and Yayo. And then there are other joints that remind me of something that would be on The Big Withdrawal, which is a very underrated album, one of my favorite albums that's not official, that apparently got leaked by a groupie. So tapping into those different pockets, I liked it. And for me, all of the production on here is great. Because I will say some of Banks's, more modern work, there's some beats that I don't really like on a lot of his projects. And I'm like, I kind of skipped that record because the production's not up to par. But here, every single beat works. And this is easily one of the best produced albums that he's released in recent years. So I gotta start there. So as Banks has done structuring his albums, the first half usually is his hook to reel you in, because it's just straight lyrical excellence and bars everywhere. If you're watching this, you already know Lloyd Banks is a god tier MC, so no one's here to debate that. And if I spent time breaking out every line and everything that I like, this review and recap would be like a few hours long, because there's so much to digest when it comes to Lloyd Banks' skill set. Again, I've said it before in my other reviews, it's the momentum at which he raps at, keeping that flow going non-stop, while also being able to carry these very intricate compound rhymes, or multis as some people call them, all throughout, breaking one bar into two. And I just think that it's magnificent that he's able to do this. And it's not like he does it on one track. Every single one of his songs, he raps with this type of cadence and format, and it's crazy. And for me, the biggest component that really shows off that lyrical skill within that first half is Book of Records. There is this pocket that he finds when he is rapping 4 bars, and he has an inner multi that he carries on. And I just want to play it right quick because I think that it's just mind-blowing. It made me want to slap the ground and throw my hat like T-Rex does in his battles. And he does it again in the second verse, but that one right there, I heard that, I literally was just like, oh, that's so ill. If you ain't top tier, mind your business. I love that bar. And that beat is ill too. I love that violin sample, and just the pace of it. It just allows Banks to just attack it aggressively. And when he has that growl, Eminem said this a while back, that there's a certain growl that he hears when Lloyd Banks raps, and he looks for that whenever he's done a feature. And I think it all is about the right production, and this one definitely pushes his pen and his vocal presence on that. It's just an aggressive beat that I love. Another favorite of mine in the first half of the record is Haddonfield. I love that eerie beat with that vocal sample singing over it. Like, it just is perfect for a title like that. And with this being Halloween Havoc, it's even more perfect having Haddonfield as a record. And again, he's just going on a lyrical slaughter, as you would imagine Banks to do. And then the next record is supposed to be, this is one that sounds and reminds me of The Big Withdrawal. There's this record on there called Down for Your Niggas, or Down With Your Niggas. I believe it's a sample that's like, down with your niggas, and Banks is rapping into it. This gives me that same type of energy, and I couldn't help but bop to it and get reminiscent feelings listening to this record as that one. And of course, Banks sliding all over that too. And even the way that he uses the sample as a part of the hook and harmonizing alongside it is very similar to Down With Your Niggas. And then the next song, Die Slow, threw me for a loop because it's not Banks's typical pocket. This sounds more of an updated beat that I could hear one of the younger, artists rapping on, but still Banks kills it. And I even love the hook with his harmonizing when he's like, I'd rather live fast than die slow. And a lot of this album has that harmonizing and melodic cadence to the hooks, which is something that he used to do a lot more. Not to say he's completely done with it, but there are a lot of records on here that remind me of the way he used to do it back then. Now, when we get to track 8, called Save the Spot, that's when the tide really turns, and I'm like, okay, Banks is really tapping into more introspection than he's used to, where he has 2 verses detailing his last conversations and his thoughts with people who are close to him that passed away. I'm assuming family members. I can't figure out who the first person is because he is saying all these things like, I should go on tour, split half with you. I visit your son that's still in a can. I remember sitting by your bedside, red-eyed. So it's obviously somebody that's close, but just the fact that he's given up this personal information says a lot, because Banks is a private person. And the reason why I don't really know who he's talking about here is because he is private and he keeps that close to the heart. He's not on social media and in interviews talking about all of his issues. So it's somebody close that he lost for the first verse. And then the second verse, he is saying things like, you know, whenever I'm sad, I use your memory, you know, to bring me back out of whatever dark cloud I'm in. And the hook going, you know, when it's my time, you know, to go upstairs, save a spot for me. And that really hit me in the feels just listening to Banks be this vulnerable. Then the next record, Made a Fool of Me, which is another one that reminds me of The Big Withdrawal, the melody on the hook. But I love that. And then the beat going along with it, having this like undertone bass that you really can hear, you know, playing in headphones or speakers, is something that Banks and the entirety of G Unit has done with a lot of their beats, where you have this it's like a really low tone that you, like I say, only hear on better speakers. And I associate that kind of bass with this kind of pace and boom bap with G Unit a lot, because again, this is part of the sound. So it just made me bop my head even harder. And I feel like this is possibly shots at 50. He takes shots at 50 a lot, especially when it comes to like what things used to be. And there's definitely some lines in there towards 50. And I think this is definitely the case. Like that line where he says, y'all put too much in history, it don't mean nothing. It could be towards somebody else, but the fact that we've only seen that type of history with Banks, G Unit, and 50, the yes men still massaging your ego, way too much buffering. You think I didn't notice obstacles because of lack of inclusion? And that sentiment carries on in the next record, Changed Up, where it kind of has that same messaging and also a vibe of old school Banks, what I'm used to, and yet again harmonizing on the hook. You changed on me. That sound like, oh, I love that, man. I mean, lines like, want it, but I move when I wanna. You want your pet on me, you know, control. And yet again, when it comes to Banks, who's been, you know, over his career. And again, I don't think any of this is malicious, but I just think it's him letting 50 and others know that, like, I hear shit you say. Because I mean, I think I've heard 50 say something, you know, recently, like, that's why Banks is mad at me or some shit like that. So I feel like it's in the air. I don't feel like it's smoke, like, oh, Banks is like, I want to smoke, but it's just like, nah, I hear what you're saying, and that's not the case, you know. So definitely it could be for other people for sure that we don't know, but the biggest highlight is 50 because it's right there. And then we get the eye test with this, like, oh my god, I love this beat. It reminds me of TOS. I don't know if y'all remember that album, Terminal on Sight, but that's the name of the track, is TOS on the TOS album. And it has the same bop, the same pace. Again, it's one of those records that pushes Banks' pen and tonality to be a lot more hype. And I love the hook being melodic. Again, I gotta say that. Vintage Banks, man. Skipping a few tracks down, like I mentioned at the beginning of this review, there's another record that reminds me of What's Beef, or uses the same sample, and like is like a real deep dive G Unit radio, like 2000s type joint, is Father Figure. I love this beat. It just is dark, dirty, sounds like it could have been from The Alchemist. And yet again, it has that undertone bass that you can only hear through a good speaker. And it just sounds like a dangerous beat, and you can hear that ferocity in Banks' voice. Love it. And then the track after that is a really, really introspective record that I was shocked that Banks went into this bag. Not to say that Banks can never pen anything like this, because he has elite penmanship, but this is just really crazy for him to make a record that is talking about people who committed suicide or stories gone wrong, you know, due to suicide, and people pushing people to that place. And I love the hook saying, like, you know, don't let happy eyes fool you. People will come off as happy, but they could really be going through shit for real. And the first verse is, coming from the perspective of somebody talking to themselves, looking into the mirror and having a conversation with themselves before self-transitioning to the other world. It almost made me scared thinking that this is Banks talking about himself until we get to the second verse to make me realize like, oh, he's saying from different perspectives. Then the second verse is a couple going through things and how their toxicity just led to one of them eventually transitioning themselves, to the next life. And those two perspectives are crazy because they're very common. And then I'm glad that he put that out there. I don't know if that's something that he's been suffering with or, had a friend dealing with, but I'm just always glad to hear hip hop put that out there as a way to make people check on their mental health for themselves and others, because shit's real. And I love that it leads into the final track with What's Your Purpose, kind of a therapy session to dump those thoughts on mental health. And then he returns the question with like, what's your purpose? You need to find it. We all have that. And he expresses his own purpose, and that it's not all about fame, fortune, and all of that. And the icing on the cake for me is when the track fades out, you hear Banks just say, thank you. Like, I don't know why that hit me emotionally hearing him say that, because Banks for me is like one of the greatest ever. And just to hear that humble nature of somebody that I consider such a god tier MC who's so famous and, ill-witted as well, it felt personal for him to be like, thank you for still being here listening all of these years. Because I remember the tweet a few years ago, I don't know when it was prior to 2020, when Banks stopped kind of making music. I think somebody asked him, like, Banks, why you don't make any more music? And he was like, man, be for real. Like, y'all don't want to hear from me no more. And like us as fans banded together and were like, no, Banks, keep making music. I think I even quote tweeted it like, no, sir, you need to make more music, dog. Like, you're one of the best ever. Like, a lot of us grew up on you and we don't have that type of, rapping around anymore. So we need that. So for him to take that and bless us fans for like the last 5 years with multiple projects, and him to say thank you, I just love it, man. I love when artists are able to be artists and continue to feed themselves and their family off their art, because that's what I want to do. So all in all, this is such a great album to me, and I will be bumping it as we go into the cold season. I feel like Banks' music just resonates more with me when it's colder, because he just has that gritty, New York vibe. So let me know in the comments, what was your favorite record? I have a few. The first one is Happy Eyes Lie People, Father Forgive Me, Changed Up, Book of Records, Eat What You Kill. There's a lot of records, but it's just that many dope joints. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you are subscribed, I thank you again, as Banks said. And until next time, peace.
RapNerd Productions, no capping, that's word to mommy. Instead of banking on it, now rapping is just a hobby.